Everybody, let's try this again. Although you don't know that I'm trying this again for about the 100th time. But my name is Courtney Zimmerman. I'm the first facilitator for this discussion and also the guinea pig. So hopefully this works. I'm not getting my hopes up because I've already gone through the whole thing 1.5 times. So hopefully this will be the last time that I will have to do this. Oh God, I hate technology. So, anyways, this is weird because I've already said all this already before. But I'll try to make it sound fresh and new for you guys because you obviously didn't see those other videos. So, this week's readings were all about privacy management and secrets of families. The first reading we started out with was relational dialectics theory. It really focused on Bakhtin. He is kind of like a founding father for dialogue and kind of the go-to guy for all things relating to language and dialogue. And I took Dr. Lehman's language and social interaction class last year, and we really covered a lot of Bakhtin. So I am kind of familiar with it, and it's nice to go back to things that I recognize. But Bakhtin stated that dialogue is a simultaneous fusion and also differentiation from another. So in order to engage in dialogue, participants must fuse their perspectives or kind of obtain common ground so they can have that dialogue, but also sustain their own uniqueness for their individual perspectives. So maintaining that individuality, those two things really do contribute to maintaining that dialogue. So Bakhtin regarded all of social life as the product of a contradiction-ridden, tension-filled unity of two embattled tendencies. And these involve centripetal and centrifugal communication tactics. So centripetal will be dynamics of unity, and centrifugal will be dynamics of difference. So these contradictory styles are present in family communication in the dialectic that involve these different and often opposing voices that come together and can sometimes clash. And sometimes those voices, some of them are more dominant, while others are a little bit more suppressed. So it is interesting to see how they're defined in family communication. Now, I'm interested to see what you all think of dialectical contradictions. Can you think of any examples or thoughts on centripetal and centrifugal communication and dialectical flux and how they relate to family communication? With relational dialectic theory, we read about the tension between generality and particularity. RDT has 3 families of contradictions: dialectics of integration, certainty, and expression. So if you have any thoughts on those, I'd be glad to hear them. Finally, Bakhtin kind of developed these layers of dialogue involving dialogue as constitutive process, dialogue as utterance, and dialogue as aesthetic moment. Now, it's interesting, at the end of the chapter, the authors said that they weren't going to elaborate on them a whole lot because they don't really apply to family communication. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on what these are that Bakhtin developed, and why aren't they used in family communication? Are there ways that they can be utilized more? So yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that. The next thing that we read was communication privacy management theory, and that was really kind of the foundational theory that we read in all of these readings. Is kind of the basis for everything. It helps us learn how people regulate the simultaneous push and pull of private disclosures. It's between wanting to tell people something and also wanting to keep the information to yourself. So it's interesting that people can become shareholders in privacy when information is disclosed, and then it kind of becomes an issue of who really owns that information. Is it the person who originally had the information, or because they decided to share it with others, do those shareholders now own a part of that information, even if it is considered private. They talked about two metaphoric boundaries, personal and collective. Personal boundary is the private information that you keep solely to yourself as an individual, and the collective boundary is what you choose to share with others. So you kind of develop these thick and thin lines or boundaries that the authors talked about. Now, example they provided in the book was with Sergio and John. Not sure how to pronounce that name. The first one, not John. Sergio tells John he's going to propose to his partner, and John goes and tells their friends. Now, it's interesting because, again, who really owns that information? Sergio probably thinks that he's the one who owns it because it was his information to begin with, but since he chose to disclose that information to John, John now owns a part of it. And it didn't say in the example whether or not John inadvertently told the partner that Sergio was going to propose to, but it is interesting to think about. It does make you cautious, perhaps, of who you tell things to people, and also disclaimers that you may need to give to people. And one example is, pretty sure I heard this on the radio, but I'm not entirely sure. There's a dilemma where this girl told her friend that she was pregnant and going to have a baby, and then that friend went and posted it on Facebook how excited she was that her friend was pregnant and going to have a baby, when in actuality the friend hadn't told anyone yet. So the friend obviously was very upset with the other girl for disclosing that information before running it by her, but you also have to wonder, maybe she didn't know that she hadn't told anybody, but it is kind of who owns that information. I personally would think that the person who's pregnant owns that information, but there was a lot of discussion over whether or not they want to risk their relationship with trying to talk about that problem. So any thoughts on that are more than welcome. Now the authors go on to describe 3 types of permeability orientations for internal and external boundaries. And they are described as high, moderate, and low. And I was just wondering if you and your family identify with any of these orientations, and the levels of openness of what you disclose to people within your own family, and also people in the external boundary outside of your family. So if you identify with any of them, what would that be? And did you notice if your family incurred any changes as you grew up? Did you go from maybe a high permeability to low permeability, or kind of stay in moderate? Did you change at all? If you have a family now, is it different at all from what you had when you were growing up? I'm just interested to hear what those different changes are, and if people tend to adopt how they share things based on how they grew up, or if they change things with their own families now. And also if you notice any similarities and differences between your family and your own family that you may have now. I also want to know if you've ever experienced any boundary turbulence with admitting and socializing new family members. They did touch on that at the end of the chapter, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that. Moving on to the handbook and the chapter about managing private information. I thought it was interesting. There was one little snippet that said that children tend to tell their mothers more private information than their fathers. That's on page 323. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. This is another gender issue, obviously, and I do think it relates a lot to what we discussed in last week's readings regarding gender and families, and how that impacts what people share with each other. And while we focus more on the gender of the child, I think it's interesting to flip that and see how the gender of the parent affects what children disclose to their parents. Obviously, I think I'm much more closer with my mom because I'm a female and she's a female, but I'm interested to hear if other people have similar relationships with their families. And they went on to talk about 5 criteria that mold privacy protection and privacy accessibility rules. including culture, gender, motivations, context, and perceived risk-benefit ratio. Now, they only talked about the first three, culture, gender, and motivations. And one of their examples was that in Western culture, we value a high degree of openness. Clearly, with Facebook, everyone just puts everything out on the line for everyone to see. Yet, it's still acceptable for people to have, for families to establish privacy protection rules. So that is just kind of a cultural difference compared with other cultures who may not be as open to begin with. So I was just wondering if you can think of any other examples that would fall into the privacy protection and privacy accessibility. Now, kind of on a side note, I was just kind of wondering if communication privacy factors into the information that people post for this class. Now, it is a family communication class, so we do have to share some things about our family, but I do know that I actually do kind of hesitate sharing some of the things about my family because of that privacy management and that loyalty to my family, and it's I know that we have a particular boundary for this class. Obviously, what we say isn't going to go outside of the class, but it's just, it can be challenging to share things about family with a group of strangers that I'm never going to officially meet, or I may have already have a class with you, I'm not sure. But I just think it's interesting because you can feel almost wary sharing some of that information about your own families, even though it is a family communication class. So do you maintain that level of privacy with your family, or do you maintain that you want to get a good grade? So, and post something that includes some information just so you can contribute to the discussion. So, interested to hear what you guys all think about that. The next article was privacy in voluntarily child-free couples. And it said that VCF couples are blemished by character flaws, not by physical abnormalities, which is interesting because they're classified in a different group from people who are infertile or cannot have children for certain reasons, but they are still highly stigmatized in society. And I liked in this article that they had a lot of transcripts of people who had actually said things during their interviews. And there was a 30-year-old woman who said that coming out as a VCF couple is similar to coming out of the closet as a homosexual. And I found that very interesting because there's obviously stigmas that are associated with each thing. And it's just interesting how society perceives both of them. I was just wondering if you guys thought that was an accurate comparison. I also thought it was interesting bringing up another gender issue. It seems that from the examples, women were looked down upon for not having children, while as males seem to develop a camaraderie similar to jealousy, whereas the males who had children were jealous of the men who didn't have children. So it's another gender issue that is interesting to explore. It also said VCF couples also tend to have couple friends who are also VCF, which decreases apprehension about the disclosure. This article is all about how people disclose information about being a VCF couple. And I found this similar to the social contagion of divorce that we talked about last week. I was just wondering what your thoughts are on the similarities of this, and if there are other types of social contagions that affect big lifestyle changes, such as divorce or choosing not to have children. And just to wrap up, I liked a lot of the responses that people gave about being VCF. I think it's really interesting to read those, but especially from a 30-year-old female on pages 141 to 142. I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, now moving on to privacy and in-laws. My voice is growing hoarse from doing this 45 times. So in-law relationships are involuntary and come with the obligations and expectations of family without the benefits of family. I was just wondering, that quote was found on page 240. Do you guys agree with that? how do you interpret your own relationship or your parents' relationship if you don't personally have in-laws? How do you perceive those relationships with in-laws? Now, I'm not married, so I just go based on the relationship that my parents have with their in-laws. But I just think it's interesting that that quote just seemed to sum it up, that it comes with obligations, but not the benefits of family. So overall, I just want to know what your overall takeaways from this article were. Did any of it resonate with you for people who are married and have in-laws? Did you find a lot of similarities with your own relationships? Or even do you find differences between your own in-laws that you have from being married and the in-laws in relationships from your parents? And are there any similarities or differences? That'd be interesting to hear about. Now, more of a side note, but did you notice, because there were 2 studies for this article, but in the second study of the mothers and fathers sample, there were 88 mothers who were mother-in-laws or going to be mother-in-laws, and 13 father-in-laws that were sampled for the study. And they were asked to choose just one daughter or son-in-law that they had a relationship with to evaluate for the survey. And each group, the mothers and the fathers, chose to evaluate their relationship with their son-in-law more than their relationship with their daughter-in-law. I'm not sure if I explained that very clearly, but it's on page 247. So there were 37 mothers who chose their daughter-in-law compared to 51 mothers-in-law who chose their son. And 6 fathers chose their daughter-in-law while 7 chose their son. And I was just wondering if you guys thought there's any significance to that, or is it more coincidental that people would choose to evaluate their son-in-law's relationship over their daughter-in-law's? Now lastly, moving on to the Secret Histories article, I thought this was really interesting. I like reading these New York Times articles. But you don't need to elaborate on the intimate details of the secrets your family may or may not have, unless you want to. But I'm curious to know if any of you know about any family secrets or have a hunch about secrets within your family. Do you also agree that it's important to keep those secrets during one's life, or attempt to lead clues to their discovery of the secrets after their death? Do you think people are being selfish, or do you think that they're protecting their families? Similar to Goldberg in the article. So it's just interesting how people will keep these secrets when they're alive, but once they've passed, they think it's very crucial to pass on that secret. And I just find that fascinating that people don't want to talk about it when they're alive, but still think that's important enough to be shared later on with their family. I also just want to know your overall reactions to the secrets uncovered in the article. I personally know that there's so many things I want to ask my family about perceived secrets. It may not even be secrets. It could just be miscommunications with my family. But it's interesting to see how a lot of things can be uncovered once a death in the family has occurred. So it's kind of a bittersweet topic, it seems like. So just want to know your overall thoughts with things like that. I hope you all enjoyed the readings. I certainly did. I thought it was very interesting to learn about how secretive people can be and how they manage their private lives and then choose to share them with their family and people outside their family. So I'm interested to see what you guys all have to say in the discussions that's coming up, and really hope this video posts because my voice is growing hoarse. I don't know how many more times I can post this, but hopefully you all have better luck than I did. And yeah, I was your guinea pig, so I guess I deserve it. But all right, I hope you guys all have a great week, and look forward to see your all videos as well. So I'll see you guys later. Bye.